The right tools make all the difference. Hey, I am Chuck, the bureaucrat. I kind of figure that you guys already know that old clipboard trick, right? Like you want to go someplace, but you don't want them to kick you out. So you get a beat up old clipboard, you cram some papers in it, and then you just walk around with a scowl on your face. Like, works like magic. Well, there's a couple of similar tricks that you can apply in the Pentagon or really in any conference room meeting. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through 3 props: a calculator, a pen, and a cup of coffee. And then I'll give you a glimpse of a bonus prop that's really a tool for human intelligence collection. All right, calculator first. And here I'm talking about a nice mid-sized 4-function calculator, not some promotional thing with the tiny buttons, and not one of those huge graphing calculators. Now, the situation you use a calculator in is when somebody's giving a PowerPoint presentation with lots of numbers, and you are not the primary person receiving the brief. This works best if you're the number 2 man, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out this video. Now, the point of the calculator is to let the briefer know that somebody's checking their math. The way I figure it, there's like a 3 to 5% human error rate whenever data is hand-typed. And that means that if the brief has more than 20 numbers in it, it's probably got a math error. And the second you start clicking away on that calculator, the briefer realizes he's probably got a math error. Now you can do this as a form of intimidation. You can find a math error and start chipping away at the briefer's credibility, but that's kind of over the top, and trust me, you're not making any friends while you're doing it. Now the best way to use this calculator technique is to support the people at the head of the table. When there is a math error in a brief, it's not uncommon for the people receiving the brief to start to get confused. So it can be helpful if, as that confusion starts to form, you shut it down by pointing out where the error is and what is correct so you can move on. And when the folks at the head of the table see that you're down there banging away on your calculator, occasionally they'll ask you to perform some kind of calculation to help them. And what that can do is it can prevent a do-out for the briefer because it answers the question on the spot. Next is a pen. And in fact, you probably have a pen in your pocket right now, and you've probably been using it for years to communicate, "Yes, sir, I am taking your guidance." But there are at least 2 other messages you can send with a pen. First, you can use it to compliment people. I've told you before how old people love to pass on guidance to younger people. In fact, sometimes they start YouTube channels to do it. So if you're standing around and some grizzly old master sergeant makes a clever insight, you can absolutely make their day just by writing it down. The other thing you can do with a pen is an intimidation technique that's kind of like the calculator, but much more subtle. You spin your pen. Now don't fidget with your pen. That'll make it look like you're nervous and distracted. You spin your pen, and this works best if you're actively engaged. You see, even if you're good at spinning your pen, it takes a certain amount of cognitive effort. So if you're in a meeting and you're discussing difficult or frustrating matters and you're spinning your pen, what you communicate to people is, "I don't really find this taxing." It's kind of like leading a run and not getting out of breath. The last prop I want to talk about is the coffee cup. In fact, you will almost never see me without a coffee cup, but that's not particularly because I like coffee. A while back, I was working on this special project that was being led by a 3-star. And he did the strangest thing I have ever seen. He had a humidor in his office, and whenever he was leading a meeting in there, what he'd do is he'd pull out a cigar and play with it. He wouldn't light it. He'd cram it in his mouth, or he'd pull it out and admire it. And I would just sit there thinking, this is the most Sigmund Freud thing I have ever seen. Until I figured out what he was doing. You see, he was an interrupter. He'd get excited, and you could see that he wanted to inject something into the conversation. The problem is, he's a 3-star. If he does that, people just shut down and start saying yes, sir, to everything he says, or repeating it back to him, and he didn't want that. So what he was doing with the cigar was using it to prevent himself from interrupting. If you watched closely, you'd see his body language. He'd get excited and he'd jam that cigar in his mouth to prevent himself from interrupting and to cover his body language. I thought that was a pretty good idea. The only problem was Major Wico couldn't exactly pull off the eccentricity of an unlit cigar. So I started looking around for an alternative, and behold, the humble coffee cup. It's a common, everyday item that you can put to your lips at any point to stop yourself from jabbering away. You can take a coffee cup just about anywhere. In fact, if you're visiting somebody at their desk, it conveys this air of informality. Now, there is one place that you don't want to take a coffee cup. That is, you don't want to show up late to a meeting with an executive with a hot cup of fresh coffee. That sends the wrong message. Now, at the beginning, I promised you a bonus prop, and I'll save the details for our discussion of human interrogation tactics. But for now, I'll tell you that it's an 11 by 17 sheet of paper with a spreadsheet on it, one of my absolute favorite tools. But listen, you guys probably have a whole bunch of other props or tactics that you use, and if you don't mind folks having your secrets, please put them in the comments. And then check out this video to see how you can talk in code at the negotiating table.